Hey Wolfpack, and welcome back. I hope you enjoyed yesterday's video. Today, we're reading We Used to Think My Son Was Recounting a Past Life, But Now I Know Better, by Insomnia Storyteller. With that said, whether you're sitting around a campfire, on the night shift, or even laying in bed, let my voice soothe your nightmares. My son was a miracle baby. I'm sure you've heard that phrase before, but I don't mean it any less. My wife and I tried for years to have a baby, and realized it just may not be in the cards for us 15 years into the process. We tried everything: fertility clinics, drug trials, IVF, the works. Then, one day, after we re-signed to a life of not being able to share our DNA with the world, we found out she was pregnant. After calling our doctor, it was decided that bed rest would be the best for my wife. We didn't want to take any chances after all, and I spent the time doting on her and catering to her every need, willingly of course. When he finally arrived, I was overcome with joy. My wife and I chose to name him Grayson, after her deceased father Gary, but modernized. It may not have been my first choice, but I wasn't about to argue with her. And besides, I could have named him Meatloaf for all I cared. I had a child. My own flesh and blood. Things were normal with him for a while, but I'm sure you can tell that it didn't continue. He learned to talk, walk, and pretty soon, he was starting preschool. We started to notice his quirks. When he was 4, it started with little things. I remember being here, or this was where things we could chalk up to a child's imagination. However, when my wife and I became concerned was when the statements became a bit more specific, and were about things a 4-year-old shouldn't know. We were driving, taking back roads to visit my parents when Grayson said, "Mommy, Daddy, this is where we found my puppy. Do you know he came from a puppy mill? That's where they hurt dogs. Sometimes cutting body parts or forcing them to stay in their own shit." "Grayson!" my wife said. "What are you talking about? And you should know not to use potty words. You know better." We had a conversation about potty words after my wife uttered some expletives after dropping and shattering some wine glasses. "Sorry, Mommy. I just wanted to tell you where my puppy was from. He was brown and black with one white spot on his nose." "Okay, sweetie," she said, "but I don't want to hear you talking about such bad things. Hurting dogs is not a nice behavior, and I don't want you scaring other people, okay?" "Sure, Mommy. I can't wait to see Charlie again," he said cheerily, before going back to looking at his picture book. "Damon, where would he have heard such a thing?" my wife said, looking at me, her brow furrowed in concern. "I'm not really sure. Maybe on TV, you know, those ASPCA ads with those sad dogs," I said, shrugging. I think she was more concerned about it than I was. We stayed overnight at my parents' and seemed to forget the whole incident. After packing up and saying our goodbyes the next morning, we set out again on those windy roads. I was lost in the music, with my wife sleeping in the passenger seat, and Grayson staring out the window. I heard him muttering something under his breath, and thought I heard him saying that name, Charlie, again. While this in itself wouldn't indicate a past life, it was just the beginning. Grayson began saying strange things when we were driving. Things like, "This is where Charlie got run over," and "This is where I met my best friend. But worst of all, this is where my mama died." Things that even the most imaginative kids shouldn't be saying. We grew more concerned and brought him to a child psychologist. They concluded that nothing was wrong, and that Grayson was just a product of a modern age where kids heard some messed up things. She agreed to continue seeing him though, and we thought it would keep his oddities under control. My wife was not fully satisfied though, and began researching kids who would say weird things like that. We stumbled upon the world of past lives and began reading. I must admit, I wasn't the biggest believer in things like this, but my wife was enthralled. Whether or not Grayson had this condition, so to say, it satisfied her and helped her believe he was normal. One day, while driving to get ice cream from a new place, taking roads we haven't even traveled on before, Grayson pointed out the window and said, "Look, Mommy, that's where I lived without you. My blue room was awesome." She turned her head toward me and said, "We have to find out who lived there. He has to be remembering something else, something from before." I sighed and said we could go look into it later, but not to discuss it in front of him. After poring through Google later that night, we didn't find much. I doubted most towns had public records on the internet of who lived there, but I let her try, hoping it would soothe her. As I said, these kind of odd statements continued, and we let them slide. If Grayson was remembering a past life, there was really no harm in that. He was a happy kid, healthy by all means. However, I began to worry when one day, driving home from my parents' house, I hit something darting across the road. I got out of the car and walked to the front, noticing the dog laying under my bumper. I hadn't harmed him too badly. It looked like maybe a leg injury. I scooped him up, planning to take him to the nearest vet. When I opened the back of my sedan to place the dog on the seat, Grayson, now 6 years old, exclaimed, "Charlie, you're here!" Until this moment, I had forgotten about the dog's statement. I looked at my wife, who had gone sheet white. The dog I had picked up had brown and black spotted fur, with a tiny white dot on his nose. Goosebumps broke out, up and down my arms. But I told myself it was a coincidence. It had to be. Brown dogs were common, and if Grayson had a dog named Charlie previously, he was obviously going to be inclined towards naming any new one similarly. Yes, we ended up keeping the dog. It was too hard to take him from Grayson. The reason I'm writing this, though, isn't about Charlie, or any of the statements about homes or friends. It's about what happened last week. My wife, driving home from the grocery store, had been hit by a drunk driver traveling way too fast and in the wrong lane. She never saw it coming and had died on impact. I got the call and rushed over to the site, praying it wouldn't be her, that someone had stolen her purse, that she was okay. But sure enough, my beautiful wife was the one who had suffered. Through the pain of planning a funeral and breaking the news to Grayson, I missed a detail. The spot where her car had landed after rolling over several times was parked in the same spot where Grayson had pointed to and said, "This is where my mama died." When I realized this, I instantly became ill. Grayson had not been recounting a past life, but was in fact telling us the future. He knew about Charlie. He knew about the playground where he met Matt, his best friend. And he knew where my wife would meet her end. It was too much. Not everything he said had come true, though, but I'm sure in time it will. So many other things have. While knowing what is to come scares me, what frightens me the most, and what makes my very being tremble, is what Grayson had said last week while driving through the woods. "This is where I hid my first body." Thanks for listening, Wolfpack. If you want to submit your own story, the links for my email and subreddit will be down below. I've also created a Discord, so if you want to join that, the link will be in the description down below as well. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And with that said, have beautiful nightmares, and I will see you next time.